cup of coffee, sit back and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. If you're like me, you probably spend a great deal of time worrying. Worrying about your children or an upcoming job deadline, worrying about a failing relationship, feeling anxious about what you could have done better. Worrying is a full-time job, can be exhausting, and it causes unnecessary stress and anxiety. Today's guest, Dr. Tamar Chansky, says that the real secret to reducing stress is not positive thinking, but possible thinking. She's here today to provide strategies for us to transform anxious thoughts so we can handle everyday challenges optimally and successfully. Dr. Chansky is the founder and director of the Children's and Adult Center for OCD and Anxiety, and she's the author of the books Freeing Yourself from Anxiety and Freeing Your Child from Anxiety. She specializes in treating and preventing anxiety through a new understanding of how worry works. Welcome, Dr. Chansky. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Joan.
Doctor, as I had said in the introduction, I am a worrier. I worry about everything, even though rationally I know that most of what I worry about will never happen. I still worry, and I know that that can cause stress, and stress is usually a factor that plays into anxiety disorder. So I'd like to start off talking a little bit about what anxiety disorder is, because it's something very real. And a few years ago, I suffered from panic attacks, and I remember so many people had this attitude like, just snap out of it. You know, if only you could, but people actually end up in the hospital. So what is anxiety disorder, and what are some of the physical symptoms?
Right. So, Joan, there are lots of different kinds of anxiety disorders. You named panic disorder. That is one kind, and it's characterized by having just a sudden surge out of the blue. You could be sitting at a restaurant, in a movie theater, and suddenly out of the blue, you have this surge of anxiety where you feel like something is really wrong and something bad is going to happen and you need to get yourself to a hospital or get home. That is a false alarm from the nervous system that has triggered your fight or flight reaction, because nothing is actually going on in that moment, but the physical reaction you're having is your body's good reaction. If there were actually a tiger there or a real threat there, you would want to be ready to fight or flee, but that's not what's happening in the moment. And so it's very frightening to have that kind of experience, and unless someone explains what's going on, you feel like you're going crazy or out of your mind. It's very distressing.
And what I learned during that time, I did a lot of research into the fear, adrenaline, fear cycle, and I realized that when you have that feeling, you panic, hence the term, and that actually makes it worse. And so I kind of adopted this come and get me kind of attitude, and it helped me relax, and then they seemed to subside. So I don't know if that was actually a good thing to do, but it seemed to work for me.
Good job, Joan. That's exactly, you did a great job, seriously. If you can, the problem is that you get afraid of your own fearful reaction, and then it just creates this cycle where you're always on alert, worrying that it's going to happen again, which only sets you up for more anxiety and panic. So I love that come and get it kind of idea. That what you want to do is realize that it is a false alarm, and then when it happens, that you can relabel what's going on and say, there's nothing actually happening now. My body is safe. I am safe, and if I keep thinking this way, these feelings are going to pass in a few minutes.
Tamar, we talk so often about positive thinking, and I was really shocked when I heard you say that you consider positive thinking to be the high fructose corn syrup of the thinking world. What do you mean by that?
So yeah, I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon when I say that, but the damage that's done when we feel like we need to think positively when we're in a upsetting situation it creates a lot of undue stress on ourselves. That it's, we've got to be honest with ourselves about what's going on, and if we're distorting it and turning it too positive, telling ourselves things that aren't really true, that's going to create as much internal stress as thinking negatively, which is also distorted. So when we're in that corner of feeling bad, what I think of is that we don't need to be transported to, to Disneyland for adults or something. It's really just we need to see that we have options. A positive outlook is really important because what that means is that you are going to be able to see lots of different possibilities, rather than just convincing yourself that, though you're in a tough spot, that you're totally fine, everything's great, you couldn't feel better. It just starts to create this warp inside that, there have been studies about this, Joan, where people actually feel more depressed if they are kind of, not telling the truth to themselves about their situation. And so, my thought is we just don't have, it's unnecessary. We don't have to go that far. We just really need to think about different ways of looking at the situation that we're in so that we see the possibilities of how things could be different.
So it's not always the thought, it's the way we react to the thought that's important.
Exactly, because, people who are anxious or depressed may think, no one else thinks like I do, and it's not the case. The case is just that people who don't have anxiety or depression are able to treat those same thoughts, some negative thoughts when we try something new and maybe it doesn't work, or anxious thought, wondering how things are going to go, that they treat those thoughts not as the authority on the situation. I just kind of see it as something that is a first reaction, and they're able to filter it out.
So, Tamar, how does worry work on our body? What happens physically when we worry?
So what happens is if you think about this fight or flight reaction, and that is as old as the hills, as old as we are, that back in the day when we needed to protect ourselves from threat that was really waiting right outside the cave, we were ready to mobilize to protect ourselves, to fight for our lives or run for our lives. And that is our basic survival equipment that's there, that persists. Now, that worked really well in the days when danger was right around the corner, but the way that we live now, that's not the case. However, our internal equipment is sort of still the same. So we have, when we're worrying about something, the part of the brain that's active is called the amygdala, and it doesn't distinguish between what is an actual danger, threat, and what is not. So we have to make that distinction, because otherwise, you're worrying, your heart starts racing, you feel really tense, your breathing may become heavier. Even if you're not aware of these things are happening invisibly.
Tamar, we need to take a break for this week's Healthy Living Tips. Stay with us for information to help you make the positive lifestyle changes that we talk about on this show. When we return, we'll talk about the 4 steps to overcoming anxious thinking. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman, and our guest today is Dr. Tamar Chansky, author of the new book, Freeing Yourself from Anxiety. Dr. Chansky, before break, we were talking about what anxiety does to us on a physical level, and I'd like to discuss the 4 steps that we can take to overcome anxious thinking.
Sure, Joan. So, I was saying earlier that we have this sort of ancient circuit that gets fired when we are in a situation where we're not sure how things are going to go. We're, waiting to go out on a date. We're waiting for a job interview, for test results. And basically, anxiety doesn't like the wait and see. It just will rush in with worst-case scenarios. That's just how we're built. But if we can, instead of heading off to the races with that worst-case scenario thinking, if we can instead relabel that, sort of stamp that thought as, it's the amygdala or it's my worry, that's the first step really to start to hear those thoughts, again, not as an authority, but just as kind of that knee-jerk reaction, that false alarm. because otherwise we're going to get much more ramped up than we need to, than will be effective for us to handle a situation. So that's step one, is really relabeling. I call it, using your internal caller ID just to see that, this isn't an important call. This is sort of more like the telemarketer calling you, selling you something that you don't need. The second step, something started this. And so the second step really is to get specific and to narrow down what really is the problem. Maybe thinking, I'm going to totally mess up that job interview. I'm not going to know what to say. I'm not going to have the right information. And we just kind of go off with all the what ifs. And what we need to do is narrow it down to see, is there something that we really do need to take care of? Maybe there is. Maybe we need to practice with a friend. Maybe we need to, review some notes. It's okay if there's some actual practical things that we need to do, but we can't, to try to solve the problem of all the what-ifs that we're having. When they're not realistic, they're distorted, that's just going to add a ton of work and worry for us. So getting specific is the second step.
And Dr. Chansky, I would think at that point that is where we would work on eliminating fear and realizing what's rational and what's not.
Exactly. It's kind of sorting out, I think of it, Joan, as, draw a line down the middle of a paper and put all the what-ifs on one side and put all the what ises or what else's are on the other, of really what are you most afraid of, but what do you really think is going to happen in this situation? What do you really believe is going to be the outcome? It's incredible how different the answers are to those two questions. But again, once we figure out what is really the issue at hand, we have an opportunity there to kind of broaden our perspective and think about how important that is or what we want to do about it. And that third step is really, it's called optimizing, and it's really about looking around, walking around your situation and getting other perspectives on it. One of the exercises that I suggest for that step is something called the possibility panel. And, often when we're worrying about something, what happens? We feel alone. We feel alone without perspective. The possibility panel is about thinking of maybe 3 or 4 people who you would want to consult about what their advice would be about, or what their perspective would be on your situation. They can be people you actually know. They could be Oprah or the Dalai Lama, people you don't know. Of course, it's you coming up with their opinions and ideas, but just stretching to think from a different perspective really helps get you out of that corner of, negativity and anxiety and looking at the possibilities. The last step, Joan, is called mobilizing. Once you have, kind of relabeled and you get really specific about what the issue is and you've looked at it from different perspectives, then technically speaking, you're ready to move, although there may be some hesitations there. A lot of times what is an obstacle to our taking action to improve a situation or address a situation is that we set our goals too big to start. And I'd like to suggest that, when you have a goal about how to change a situation, that you sort of visualize that as maybe 3 or 4 sub-goals. So, starting to date, there may be small things that you're going to do to get ready for that, because otherwise we feel so daunted by that big goal. What do? We procrastinate. We do everything. We run the other way. We do everything but tackle it. And so it doesn't need to be that way. Small steps, often that's how we make progress.
Tamar, how do we know when it's more than simple anxiety, when it's something that we can handle on our own, and when we should seek treatment?
So really, everyone has anxiety some of the time, Joan, as we know. It's a normal phenomenon. But what is really the red flag is when you feel like you are unable to do your regular life. It starts to interfere with the things that you need to do in your life. Or you're doing those things, but you're kind of going through the motions. It's with great distress that you are getting your kids ready for school or getting to work, and you're not enjoying yourself, and you're just, events that should be fun, parties or, going out to dinner with friends, start to feel like these insurmountable challenges because of how anxiety is framing it. So when it's really taking on a life of its own like that, that's when you want to, seek some help.
Now, given that every case is different and you cannot give a blanket answer, generally speaking, when is medication the right answer, and should it be long-term?
So medication can be a wonderful tool for some at the right time for people with anxiety. And so, for a lot of people, it's going to be if they are, having difficulty sleeping, or their problems that they're having as a result of the anxiety are really interfering with them, functioning in their life. Then they need something that may be fast acting to help them sort of get over that hurdle, and to do some of the strategies that we've been talking about today. They have to feel kind of well enough to be able to do that. And so that's when medication and behavior therapy can work really well together. So that's something that folks can discuss with their doctor, and it really depends, on their individual situation, whether that's going to be an important part or really, something to keep on the sidelines if needed. So in terms of how long someone's on medication, I'm sorry to give a vague answer, Joan, but that really varies too. Some people find that that's something that they want to keep going in their lives. Other people may be on for 6 months or a year, kind of make the changes they need to make, and then they feel comfortable to start to get off the medication.
Well, as I said, Tamar, I know it's case by case, but the reason I ask that question is because I think often people just take the pill and then don't do the work. So that's why I wanted to just mention about the pharmaceutical treatment of anxiety disorder.
Right, and I think it's a really good point that, if just taking the pill, Joan, would kind of take care of everything, probably life would be, my work would be different. A lot of people would be doing different things. But what we know is that, the relapse rate with folks with anxiety with medication alone is much higher, because you're not than it would be if you are doing cognitive behavior therapy. Because really, it's in the therapy that you're learning how to change your relationship with these thoughts, how to think differently about them, how to act differently with them. As you were saying earlier, it's not so much the thought, it's what you do with it. And that's these kinds of skills are, what is really learned in cognitive behavior therapy, and those make for really lasting changes in a person's life.
The book is Freeing Yourself from Anxiety, 4 Simple Steps to Overcome Worry and Create the Life You Want by Dr. Tamar Chansky. If you'd like more information, you can visit her website, tamarchansky.com. That's TamarChansky.com. Or as always, you can visit our website, CYACYL.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in the book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Dr. Chansky, in about 30 seconds or less, what would be the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with from this interview?
I think this last point that we're talking about, Joan, that, expect that you're going to have anxious reactions to uncertainty or, to change, but don't stop there. Don't dwell on those ideas that are going to really head you down the wrong path. The way that we're really prepared in life is when we think about what we bring to a situation, what's really rational and likely to happen in a situation, and this is how we grow. So, anxiety is going to jump in with all the warnings, but the fact is, new opportunities, change, this is really what we want in our lives. This is how we grow, and we're much more prepared than we think.
Tamar, thank you so much for spending time with us today. As I said in the introduction, I'm a worrier, and I know a lot of people are, and you gave us some really great strategies today that we can employ to help reduce stress and get rid of some of our anxiety. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to having you come back one day.
Thanks so much, Joan, for having me.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.